The mahogany table stretched before me like a coffin. 20 years of board meetings in this same room, and now my own son was about to bury me in it. Evan stood at the far end, his expensive suit catching the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The company logo I'd designed hung behind him like a crown he'd stolen. "The board has voted," Evan announced, his voice cold as winter steel. "Richard Cole is hereby terminated from all positions at Coletech Industries, effective immediately." My hands gripped the leather chair arms. The same chair I'd sat in when we went public. The same room where I'd announced record profits year after year. Now these men, people I'd hired and trusted, wouldn't meet my eyes. "New leadership is needed," Evan continued, straightening his tie. "The company requires fresh vision. Modern thinking." I stared at the boy I'd raised. The son I'd given everything to. His face showed no emotion, no regret. Just cold calculation. My briefcase sat beside me, heavy with secrets he'd never imagined. My fingers traced the leather edge, but I didn't open it. Not yet. The betrayal cut deeper than any business loss ever could. The walk to the elevator felt like a death march. Employees I'd known for years suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Others whispered behind hands, stealing glances at the founder being escorted out by security. "Mr. Cole," the guard said apologetically. "I need your access card and keys. 23 years of building this company from nothing. I'd mortgaged my house, worked 18-hour days, missed birthdays and anniversaries. All for what? To be walked out like a common criminal?" Behind me, Evan's voice carried from the conference room. He was already meeting with investors, painting himself as the savior of a failing company. "He's too old," I heard him say. "Too emotional. Stuck in the past. We're better off without him." My hands trembled as I handed over my keys. The security badge with my photo felt heavier than it should. Outside, my car waited in the spot marked "Founder." Soon, someone else would park there. As the elevator doors closed, I whispered words that would haunt my son forever: "He has no idea what I've kept from him." My home office felt different now. No longer the command center of a tech empire, just an old man's den filled with memories. But memories weren't what I needed. Facts were. I pulled out a thick manila folder from my safe. Documents Evan had never seen. Contracts he'd never read. Patents filed under my name alone, not the company's. Ownership clauses buried in legal language that even our lawyers had forgotten about. My fingers traced the papers. Insurance policies. Intellectual property rights. Stock options that never transferred. For 23 years, I'd been careful. Paranoid, maybe. But careful. The first document made me smile for the first time all day. A clause stating that certain core technologies remained under my personal control. Technologies that were now worth millions. Technologies that made up 70% of our current revenue stream. Evan thought he'd won. He thought firing me would give him complete control. But he'd never bothered to read the fine print of agreements signed years before he'd even joined the company. I didn't just have papers. I had leverage. Real leverage. The memory hit me like a slap. 5 years ago, Evan had come to me broken. His startup had failed spectacularly. Investors had pulled out. Partners had abandoned him. He'd stood in this same office, hat in hand, begging for a second chance. "Dad, I need help," he'd said, voice cracking. "I know I screwed up. But give me one more shot. Let me prove myself at Coletech." I'd believed in redemption then. I'd given him a junior position, slowly grooming him for leadership. Teaching him everything I knew about business, about people, about building something that lasted. Now that kindness felt like poison in my veins. But there was something else. Something that made my stomach turn. Evan hadn't orchestrated this coup alone. Someone had helped him understand the board dynamics. Someone had fed him information about quarterly reports and investor concerns. Someone else had wanted me gone just as badly as he did. The thought consumed me. Who had been whispering in his ear? Who else had betrayed me? The answer would come soon enough, but first, I needed allies. The phone rang at midnight. I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Julie Tran. My CFO. Former CFO, I corrected myself. Richard, her voice was tight with anger. We need to talk. Did he fire you too? This afternoon. Right after you left. Cleaned out my office like I was stealing supplies. She paused. But that's not why I'm calling. You don't know half of what Evan's been hiding. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Meet me tomorrow. Neutral ground. That diner on 5th Street. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Richard, there are things about your son that would shock you. Financial irregularities. Payments to shell companies. And the signatures on some board documents. What about the signatures? I think they're forged. I think Evan has been signing your name to agreements without your knowledge. 4 months. The line went quiet except for both of us breathing. Finally, Julie spoke again. He's not just ambitious, Richard. He's crossed lines that could destroy everything you built. The diner smelled like coffee and secrets. Julie sat in a corner booth, a thick folder beside her untouched eggs. She looked exhausted, like someone carrying a terrible burden. Show me, I said, sliding across from her. She opened the folder carefully, like it might explode. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Corporate documents with signatures that looked like mine but weren't quite right. The amounts were staggering. Evan's been siphoning money to 3 different shell companies, Julie explained, pointing to highlighted figures. $2 million over the past year. All authorized with your forged signature. My hands shook as I studied the papers. He'd been stealing from his own company. From his own father. But that wasn't the worst part. Look at this, Julie flipped to another page. He's been selling company secrets to competitors. Our new AI algorithm? He leaked it to Technova for $500,000. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't just a power grab. This was systematic destruction of everything I'd built. My son hadn't just fired me. He'd been robbing me blind. Then he'll hang himself with his own rope, I said quietly. The email came from someone named Ashley Thomas. I didn't recognize the name, but her message was clear, Mr. Cole, I work in accounting. We need to talk. I have information about what's really happening. We met in a parking garage. She was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and shaking hands. A junior employee I'd probably seen around but never really noticed. I've been recording board meetings, she said without introduction. Ever since Evan took over operations. I knew something was wrong. She handed me a small digital recorder. Listen to this. It's from last week's investor call. Evan's voice filled the concrete space around us. The old man never understood technology. He held us back for years. Now we can finally innovate without his interference. I've already lined up deals with 3 major clients who refused to work with us before. My jaw clenched. He was rewriting history, making himself the hero and me the villain. There's more, Ashley whispered, glancing around nervously. He's planning something bigger. A merger or acquisition. Something that would change everything. She looked directly at me. Mr. Cole, whatever you're planning to do it fast. The investor dinner was at the Riverside Hotel. Black tie event, champagne and caviar, the kind of gathering where deals were made with handshakes and promises. I wasn't invited, but that had never stopped me before. Evan's face went white when he saw me walk in. But he was smooth, I'll give him that. Within seconds, his shock transformed into a politician's smile. "Dad," he called out loudly, drawing attention. What a surprise. "Everyone, you remember my father, the founder of Coltech." The room shifted uncomfortably. These people knew I'd been fired that morning. My presence was a disruption they hadn't planned for. I grabbed a champagne glass and raised it high. "To new beginnings," I announced, my voice carrying across the room. "And to family secrets that have a way of revealing themselves." The toast was awkward, forced. But I'd accomplished what I came for. I'd reminded everyone that I was still alive, still fighting. And judging by the nervous glances, some investors were already wondering what those family secrets might be. Later, Evan cornered me by the bar. His mask was slipping. "Don't push me, old man," he snarled. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Back home, I went through Catherine's papers. My wife had died 3 years ago, but her will was still valid. Still legally binding. And there was something in it that Evan had conveniently forgotten. Her shares in Coltech Industries. 15% of the company that she'd left not to Evan, but to our daughter Lily. Shares that Evan had somehow transferred to himself after Catherine's death. Illegally transferred. I stared at the document, my wife's careful handwriting in the margins where she'd made notes. She'd been specific. "To my daughter Lily, who always put family first, I leave my stake in the company her father built with love." But Lily had been estranged from us for years. She'd wanted nothing to do with the business world, choosing instead to become a teacher in Portland. She'd missed Catherine's funeral because of our fight about priorities and family time. Now I needed her. Not just for the shares, but for justice. Evan had stolen from his dead mother. That was a line even he shouldn't have crossed. But getting Lily to help would mean admitting I'd failed as a father. It would mean swallowing pride that had been growing for years. Still, I reached for the phone. Portland was raining when I landed. Lily met me at a coffee shop near her school, looking tired and suspicious. Teaching had changed her. Gone was the wild teenager who'd fought with me about everything. In her place sat a woman who'd learned patience the hard way. "This is about the company, isn't it?" she said without greeting. "You only call when it's about business." "Evan fired me," I said simply. She raised an eyebrow. "Good. Maybe now you'll learn what it feels like to be discarded by family." The words stung, but I deserved them. "Lily, he stole from your mother." "From you." I showed her Catherine's will. Explained about the shares. Watched her face change from skepticism to anger as she realized what Evan had done. He forged documents to steal my inheritance. And that's not all. He's been embezzling money. Selling company secrets. Everything you always said would happen when business became more important than family. She stared out the window at children playing in the rain. Her students, probably. People she'd chosen to care about instead of money and power. "Finally, I'll help you stop him. But only if you promise something. When this is over, family comes first." The leak hit the business news at 6 a.m. Anonymous documents showing questionable financial transfers. Shell companies with untraceable owners. Stock prices dropped 12% before trading was halted. My phone buzzed with calls from reporters, but I ignored them all. The story was spreading on its own now, like wildfire in dry grass. Social media lit up with speculation about corruption at Coltech Industries. Evan's damage control was immediate but clumsy. He called an emergency press conference, blamed disgruntled former employees, and industrial sabotage. But his explanations were too defensive, too detailed. He sounded guilty. By noon, my phone rang again. This time I answered. Richard Cole? The voice was professional, crisp. This is Janet Plummer from TechWatch News. We know the documents came from you. Would you like to go on record? I considered it. The nuclear option. Tell the world everything I knew about my son's crimes. But that would destroy him completely, and despite everything, he was still my child. Not yet, I said. But keep watching. This story isn't over. The reporter's laugh was knowing. Sir, I've been covering corporate scandals for 15 years. This one's just getting started. The counterattack came swift and brutal. I woke up to find my bank accounts frozen. My credit cards cancelled. Even my phone service was threatening suspension for suspicious activity. A knock at the door revealed 2 FBI agents with briefcases and bad news. Mr. Cole, you're under investigation for corporate fraud and embezzlement. I invited them in because running would look worse. They had a warrant to search my home office. I watched them photograph my safe, my files, my computer. Everything I'd used to build my case against Evan was now evidence in a case against me. Evan had played this perfectly. He'd flipped the script, making me look like a bitter ex-employee trying to destroy the company out of spite. The leaked documents could be interpreted as fabricated evidence. My access to company systems made me look guilty of the very crimes he'd committed. But he'd made one mistake. One crucial oversight that would cost him everything. After the agents left, I pulled out the folder again. The original incorporation documents. The patents. The ownership structures that predated Evan's involvement by decades. He'd forgotten that I'd built this company when he was still in diapers. My lawyer, Timothy Plummer, looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. We sat in his office surrounded by boxes of documents, trying to untangle 23 years of corporate complexity. Richard, I'll be honest with you. Evan's people have done their homework. But there's something here that changes everything. He pulled out a document I'd almost forgotten about. The original partnership agreement from 1998, when I'd first incorporated Coltech as a sole proprietorship before bringing in investors. You never fully transferred ownership, Timothy said, adjusting his glasses. This clause here states that Richard Cole maintains controlling interest in all core technologies and patents. Evan's been operating under assumed authority. I leaned forward. What does that mean? It means his firing of you was legally invalid. He doesn't have the authority to terminate the actual owner of the company. Timothy's smile was grim. Technically, you never stopped being in control. The irony was perfect. In his arrogance, Evan had never bothered to read the foundational documents of his own company. He'd assumed that 20 years of operational control meant legal ownership. Prepare the papers, I said. We're taking back the board. The fake investor meeting was Julie's idea. We rented a conference room at the Marriott, sent official-looking invitations to a dozen financial journalists, and waited. Evan arrived exactly on time, briefcase in hand, ready to charm potential investors with his vision for Coltech's future. Instead, he walked into a room full of cameras and notepads. Mr. Cole, the first reporter called out, how do you respond to allegations of financial impropriety? Evan's mask slipped for just a moment before snapping back into place. I think there's been a misunderstanding. This was supposed to be a private investor meeting. Actually, I said, standing from my chair in the back, this is exactly what it was supposed to be. His eyes found mine across the room. For the first time, I saw real fear there. He was starting to understand that this wasn't a game anymore. The public deserves to know how their investments are being managed, I continued. Especially when those investments are being funneled into offshore accounts. That's when he noticed Lily sitting beside me. His sister, who he'd thought would never care about business. His sister, who legally owned 15% of everything he'd claimed as his. The confrontation happened in the hotel parking garage. Evan cornered Lily by her rental car, his composure finally cracking completely. "You selfish bitch," he snarled. "This company would have been nothing without me. Dad was running it into the ground with his old-fashioned thinking." Lily stood her ground. "By stealing from Mom's estate? By forging documents? I built this company into what it is today. I made the deals. I brought in the investors. I created the real value." His voice was rising, echoing off concrete walls. "Not him, not you, not anyone else. Me." What he didn't know was that I was recording everything from behind a nearby pillar. Every word of his confession. Every admission of guilt. The rage that proved he was capable of anything. "I saved Coltech from becoming a dinosaur," Evan continued. "I made it relevant. I made it profitable. And I'm not letting some washed-up old man and his teacher daughter destroy what I've built." The recording would be on every board member's desk by morning. The emergency board meeting was called for Thursday morning. I'd sent each member a copy of Evan's parking garage confession along with the financial documents Julie had uncovered. The mood in the room was arctic. Board members who had voted me out just days earlier couldn't meet my eyes. They'd realized they'd been manipulated, lied to, and potentially made accessories to embezzlement. "Gentlemen," I began, standing at the head of the table I'd been dragged from. "It appears we have some things to discuss." Evan wasn't there yet. His lawyer had probably told him not to come, but arrogance would bring him anyway. He couldn't resist a fight, especially one he thought he could win. The board chairman, Robert Morrison, cleared his throat. "Richard, we've reviewed the materials you sent. If these allegations are true—" "They're not allegations," I corrected. "They're confessions." In his own words. That's when Evan burst through the doors, flanked by 2 attorneys and radiating fury. "This is a witch hunt," he announced. "My father is trying to destroy this company because he can't accept that his time is over." I smiled and gestured to an empty chair. "Please, son. Join us." But Evan wasn't backing down. As the meeting progressed and evidence mounted against him, he dropped a bombshell that nearly stopped my heart. "You want to play hardball," he said, standing and straightening his tie. "Fine. I've negotiated a merger with Prony Systems. They're buying Coltech for $2.8 billion. The deal closes in 48 hours. The room went silent. Prony was our biggest competitor. A merger would mean massive layoffs, dissolved patents, and the end of everything I'd built. "You can't authorize a merger," board member Sarah Plummer protested. "That requires full board approval." Evan's smile was cold. "Actually, as acting CEO with emergency powers, I can. The documents are already filed. If you want to stop me, you'll need a court order. And good luck getting one before the deadline." My blood turned to ice. He was willing to destroy the entire company rather than give up control. This wasn't about business anymore. This worked with Timothy on legal injunctions. Lily coordinated with reporters to keep pressure on through media coverage. But it was Ashley who provided the breakthrough. Her hacking skills, hidden behind an accountant's quiet demeanor, cracked Evan's encrypted files. "Mr. Cole," she called at 3 a.m., voice shaking with exhaustion and excitement. "I found everything. The merger documents, yes, but also his personal accounts. He's been embezzling for 3 years, not just months. The total is over $8 million. I stared at the computer screen showing bank transfers, cryptocurrency purchases, and offshore investments. My son hadn't just been stealing company money. He'd been building a war chest, preparing for this exact scenario. "There's more," Ashley continued. "He's been selling insider information to Prony for 2 years. This merger isn't sudden. It's been planned. He's been feeding them our trade secrets to make the acquisition easier. Alarms started going off throughout the building. Security alerts flashed on computer screens. Evan knew someone had breached his systems. "We need to move," I said. "Now." Evan showed up at my house at dawn. I watched through the security camera as he walked up my front steps alone, no lawyers, no bodyguards. Just a man who'd run out of moves. I opened the door before he knocked. "Dad," he said quietly, and for a moment he looked like the boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. "Evan." We sat in my living room, surrounded by family photos that now felt like evidence of a life I'd imagined rather than lived. "Drop this," he said, his voice calm but his hands trembling. "Walk away. Take a generous settlement and disappear. Keep fighting me, and you'll lose more than the company. You'll lose everything." The threat was delivered without emotion, which somehow made it more chilling than screaming would have been. This was the real Evan. Cold. Calculating. Capable of anything. "The board meeting is tomorrow," I replied. "See you there." He stood slowly, straightening his jacket. "I tried to do this the easy way. Remember that." After he left, I sat in the quiet house and wondered what monster I'd raised. The boardroom felt like a courtroom. Evan entered with his usual confidence, carrying a leather presentation folder and wearing his most expensive suit. He'd prepared slides about the Prony merger, financial projections, and integration timelines. But when he reached for the projector controls, I stood up. "Before you begin," I said, placing my thick folder on the mahogany table with a sound like thunder, "I think the board needs to see something." Every face turned toward me. The folder seemed to pulse with its own energy, heavy with secrets and evidence. Evan's composure cracked slightly. "Dad, whatever games you're playing." "No games," I interrupted. "Just truth. Something this board hasn't heard in quite some time." I opened the folder slowly, ceremoniously. Documents spilled out across the polished wood. Bank statements, forged signatures, recorded confessions, and merger agreements that proved systematic betrayal. "Gentlemen," I said, looking at each board member in turn, "you've been lied to." The evidence was overwhelming. I presented each piece methodically: the forged signatures that had authorized illegal transfers, the shell companies that existed only to launder stolen funds, Lily's rightful inheritance that had been illegally claimed, and the original incorporation documents that proved Evan had never legally owned controlling interest. The room erupted in angry voices and shocked whispers. Board members who had trusted Evan realized they'd been manipulated. Investors who had supported the merger saw they'd been sold a company built on lies. But the final piece of evidence was the most damaging: recordings of Evan selling company secrets to Prony Systems. His own voice describing proprietary algorithms, revealing client lists, and coordinating the very merger that would destroy Coltech. "This isn't a business decision," I said, playing the audio through the conference speakers. "This is treason." Evan slammed his fist on the table, papers scattering. "This company dies before I give it back to you," he screamed, all pretense of control abandoned. "You think you can destroy me? I'll burn it all down first." The threat was recorded by every phone in the room. What followed was the complete meltdown of a man who'd built his life on lies. Evan raged at the board, threatened lawsuits, and screamed accusations at everyone in the room. But with each outburst, he accidentally confirmed details from the evidence against him. Those shell companies were legitimate investments, he shouted, admitting their existence. Prony paid fairly for that information, confirming the industrial espionage. I had every right to use Mom's shares. Acknowledging the theft from Catherine's estate. Board members quietly activated their phone cameras, recording every admission. His lawyers tried to stop him, but rage had taken over. This was no longer the composed businessman who'd orchestrated my firing. This was a child throwing a tantrum because his toys were being taken away. Security was called when he threw a chair at the wall, leaving a dent in drywall that had witnessed 20 years of civilized business discussions. "You'll regret this," he screamed as guards entered the room. "All of you. It's not over." They escorted him out while he continued shouting threats that would later be used as evidence of intimidation and witness tampering. The vote was unanimous. Evan Cole was stripped of all positions, authority, and access to Coltech Industries. His employment was terminated for cause. All agreements signed under his authority were voided pending legal review. The board also voted to freeze all company assets until a full forensic audit could be completed. Evan's personal accounts were flagged for investigation. The merger with Prony was cancelled, with documents proving it had been negotiated through corporate espionage. I stood with Lily and Julie as the votes were tallied. 20 years of building this company, 5 years of grooming Evan as my successor, and now watching it all come crashing down because of his greed. But something had changed in that boardroom. The lies were gone. The manipulation was exposed. For the first time in months, I felt like Coltech might actually survive. "Richard," Board Chairman Morrison said, "the board would like to offer you interim CEO position while we conduct our search." I looked at Lily, who nodded encouragement. Then at Julie, who smiled for the first time in weeks. "I accept," I said. "But only temporarily. This company needs new leadership. Real leadership." The aftermath moved quickly. Within a week, I'd resigned as interim CEO and recommended Lily for the position. She had her mother's wisdom and none of my blind spots about family versus business. Julie was named CFO, with full authority to rebuild our financial systems and implement oversight that would prevent future embezzlement. The FBI investigation into Evan expanded to include wire fraud, securities violations, and racketeering. His assets were frozen pending restitution to the company. Coltech's stock price recovered as news of the cleanup spread. Clients who had been nervous about the leadership transition now praised our transparency and commitment to ethical business practices. But sitting in my office, looking at Evan's empty desk through the glass wall, I felt no victory. Only sadness for the family we'd never been able to become. Lily stopped by that evening. "Dad, I know this was hard. Turning in your own son." "He stopped being my son when he decided money was more important than everything else," I replied. "Still, the wounds would take time to heal. Family scars always do." 3 weeks later, a package arrived at my house with no return address. Inside was a flash drive labeled, "For Father," in Evan's handwriting. I stared at it for an hour before plugging it into my computer. Evan's face filled the screen, but he looked different. Older. Harder. The recording had been made in what appeared to be a cheap motel room. "You think you won," his voice said calmly. "You think exposing me ended this. But you don't know everything I've done. You don't know about the backup systems. The offshore accounts you'll never find. The contacts who still owe me favors." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes cold as winter stone. "I've had 3 years to prepare for this day. 3 years to build networks you can't imagine. The merger with Prony was just plan A. I have plans you haven't dreamed of." The screen flickered, then showed financial documents I'd never seen before. International shell corporations. Cryptocurrency wallets. Contracts with companies in countries that didn't cooperate with US law enforcement. "I'm coming back, Dad. And when I do, I'll take everything. Not just the company. Everything you've ever loved." The video ended with a final message: "This isn't over. It's just beginning." I sat in my quiet house, staring at the blank screen, wondering what other monsters I'd created without knowing it.